Good evening, everyone. I can't be there tonight because I have an obligation with my family that I'm going to not be able to be there in person, but I am been allowed to record via video chapters 4 and 5, so I appreciate that opportunity. Kat, I'm sorry I can't meet you tonight. I hope I get to in the future. This book is wonderful, and I hope that we have an opportunity to sync up some other time. So thank you. So starting off, chapter 4 starts with John Porter's bedroom. Porter is a PhD designer who works at the University of Washington Human-Centered Design and Engineering program. Better than most people, Porter can tell you how to create an inclusive solution because technology is closely integrated with everything he does. In a world where most technology is designed to be used with a keyboard, mouse, or touchscreen, Porter depends primarily on speech recognition. He uses his voice to interact with through a program called Dragon. Dragon listens and follows his commands. Porter ties his experience with gaming to everyday life and the connections between play and inclusion. The power of shifting who makes something has had similar effect in industries beyond gaming. More designers are focused on adapting objects to work for a diversity of people. The cycle of exclusion shifts towards inclusion when more people can openly participate as designers. With this in mind, let's take a closer look at 3 skills of successful inclusive designers. First, the ability to identify ability biases and mismatched interactions between people in the world. Also, to create a diversity of ways to participate in an experience. And 3, design for interdependence and bring complementary skills together. Ability biases and mismatched interactions. Many organizations create solutions for thousands, if not millions, of people. This means thousands of designers and engineers bringing their biases to the process. The underlying challenge is human diversity. Ability is one of the few categories that transcends all other types of human diversity. John Porter keeps a wall of exclusion of video game controllers on his wall because that reminds him of that type of design exclusion. Specifically, video game controllers require you to have thumbs. If you don't, how do you use them? Human ability in its many physical, cognitive, and societal forms is a building block of design. An ability bias is a tendency to solve problems while using our own abilities as a baseline. When we do so, our solutions end up working well for people with similar abilities and circumstances, but can exclude a wider group of people. So we have to come up with a diversity of ways to participate. Mismatched interactions also arise when we create solutions with only one way to participate. Example, a controller that requires 2 thumbs. Inclusive designers create a multitude of ways for people to participate. Inclusive design is a methodology that enables and draws on a full range of human diversity. Most importantly, that means including and learning from people with a range of perspectives. Universal design is one size fits all. Inclusive design is one size fits one. So how to make accessibility accessible? 4 unique challenges that people commonly face when they're new to accessibility. The lack of educational resources. How do we learn how to do this? Where can we find out? Complex legal verbiage. Accessibility focuses on legal standards. The language can be intimidating. Finding the signal to the noise. We need better ways to validate inclusive design solutions are working as intended in the real world. And it's a highly manual process. Without automation, it's very time consuming. You have to comb over every single page, and the results are often inconsistent. Next, we move into Chapter 5. After completing the necessary education, this chapter focuses on design of buildings, and particularly architects in a more urban environment. So how generational exclusions are made to be broken of the many professionals who contribute to the design of our world, architects have to achieve some of the most stringent criteria before being allowed. This makes the role of an architect a useful lens to examine how we make. A design is shaped by the history of events that precede it. So that is the status quo bias. If we repeat what mistakes we made in the past, we repeat those mistakes. We need to figure out how to overcome them while including the past culturally and when it matters. In 2015, Detroit became the first city to be named a UNESCO City of Design. As the automotive industry declined, the recession of 2008, the city went bankrupt. In 2013, more than 1 million people left, never to return. Urban planning and architecture played a role in this decline. Neighborhoods were demolished in the 60s to make way for the Chrysler Freeway of mixed neighborhood designed by Ludwig Miles van der Rohe. The thriving center of Detroit's African-American community was destroyed, and most residents from the Black Modern neighborhood were moved to public housing projects across the city. The Brewster Homes, which later grew to become the Brewster Douglas, was the first federally funded project in the U.S. The stark, cramped design of these 20-story block-shaped towers was a far cry from the original townhomes. Now I'm going to share a video that kind of discusses, from a history perspective, that culture that grew in Brewster Douglas.
Before their demolition in early 2014, the Brewster Douglas housing projects existed as a symbol of blight and crime. Their empty, rubble-filled apartments and broken windows stood sentinel for 6 years over downtown Detroit's north side and the thousands of daily commuters that passed by them along Interstate 75. Despite their ominous association, the Brewsters, as they are called locally, prospered for a number of years and housed thousands of working-class Detroiters before their eventual abandonment. Their decline and dereliction was in many ways a direct result of the many economic, social, and racial adversities that plagued Detroit over the past several decades. The construction of the Brewster Douglas project took place in multiple phases over a number of years. The project was funded by federal subsidies and was part of a massive urban revitalization initiative that constituted the movement and concentration of working-class Black families into a mixture of homes, townhouses, and apartment buildings in Detroit's Lower East Side. The construction of the projects met protests from the Black community who resisted being moved around at the city's whim. But, as with most of the rest of the country in the 1930s, African-American citizens did not have much of a voice when it came to public matters and were largely ignored. Upon completion, the projects drew tenants mostly from the historically African-American neighborhood Paradise Valley in Detroit's Near East Side. This neighborhood, a cultural mecca for jazz and blues in Detroit, went on to be demolished in the 1960s to make way for the construction of Interstate 75 in Lafayette Park. On September 9, 1935, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was in Detroit to kick off the demolition of the Paradise Valley neighborhood, citing a 95% tax delinquency and a crime rate that was 6 times above the city average as justification for its removal. The Brewster homes were the first structures to be built as part of the Brewster projects and were opened in 1938 with 701 units. They were built on the property that was once Paradise Valley. By the time construction was completed in 1941, the residential blocks bordering Boobin, Hastings, Wilkins Streets, and Mack Avenue consisted of 943 individual housing units. In 1942, construction continued as 2 6-story apartment buildings were built. 9 years later, the original Brewster homes were demolished and replaced with a series of row houses that increased the project's capacity and density. Also at this time, the 6 14-story apartment buildings that have since become iconic of the failed housing project were also added to the property. At the peak of the Brewster Douglas project's tenancy, they were home to anywhere between 8,000 and 10,000 Detroiters.